All right. So Thomas, welcome to China.
Well, thank you.
Maybe share with us a bit of your work. I think people read about you, but coming from you, like personally, I think will make a lot of resonance with people who are following what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I work with lots of people individually, mostly, but in groups all around the world on their human development. And through human development, I encountered, oh wow, wait a minute, there is a lot of trauma and there's a lot of unintegrated stuff in us that actually blocks us from being the expression that we sometimes desire to be, but it doesn't really happen for many people in life. So then I looked at trauma and how trauma and transpersonal development go together, and human development and cultural development. And then I encounter, but when you look at an individual that comes with a trauma, then usually the trauma is not a standalone thing, but it's embedded into a much bigger carpet.
Yep.
So that net of trauma is very interesting. So then I discovered how collective trauma works, because my work is also started very strongly in Germany, Israel, the Holocaust, and in the United States, slavery, race questions, and the Native American genocide.
Yeah.
And then I started to see universal principles. But then, through working with people, I thought, wow, we need to start somewhere completely different. We need to start with our children. We need to start with the basic attachment processes, because trauma creates, again, the next generation attachment trauma. So, and then a friend of mine in Germany started a huge project. They worked with the government on education, with Angela Merkel, on the next 10 years of education. But in a kind of a civil society movement, they started to create a whole movement of a new schooling system. They also created an MA at the University for Potential-Oriented Teachers, and the whole thing is called Potential-Oriented Education. And now, in the meanwhile, it spreads, and more schools, I think they have more than 100 schools already transformed into potential-oriented education. And maybe that's something that we are both interested. So let's talk a little bit about how maybe you share a bit how you see education, or what needs to change from your perspective in China, and then maybe what needs to change globally. Maybe we have very similar experiences.
No, indeed, absolutely. Because I think maybe compared to you, I'm completely amateur in terms of understanding human being. The most I've done is to live as one, maybe half one. I think we're all on our journey of completion.
That's right.
Somewhere. But what triggered me to be interested in education was, I guess, both personal and then probably more collective, in the sense of thinking of us as a generation. Personal meaning I have 3 children myself, so they're entering school. I guess when you become a parent, everybody become sort of a half educator somehow, right?
That's
Self-made.
Right. That's right.
And I realized how in the more mainstream education, education is used as a utility, right? So it's basically viewed as utility. You use education to get scores, and which lead to degrees, which lead to opportunity to work, right? So I think it's really thinking of human being as an economic actor, which of course by large nature we are, and especially in China, over the last 40 years, which basically is the time when generation of ours grow up. It's largely, there's a almost single most important agenda is about economic development, right? Which again has been a great thing. It's timely, and then has, really lifted China out of poverty. If you look at there's many basic living standard, it's huge improvement. So I think, in a way it's a blessing, like if you think about it. But of course it has a lot of downside and then side effects which people didn't expect, right? So I think one thing is about environmental destruction, right? So things about sustainability wasn't thought about, and then also, I guess it's lacking a focus of, human beings as human beings. Rather, there's such as important, the focus of human being as economic actor overwhelms anything else. So that, I think that's a big realization that I came to. And then when I look at school education, I think both probably better in the West, but it's pretty prevalent almost anywhere, is how do we teach kids to become themselves, right? So rather than teach them math, teach them, literacy, which they will learn, and it's important to acting. in today's society, but like there's very little attention being put into grooming them into good human beings. So I think part of it is because even we as adults, I only kind of got on this journey myself in my late 30s. Like when you start thinking, oh, I have a pretty quote unquote successful life, but what is really the meaning for my life other than making ends meet. So I think that was really the intention. So I have this, again, the sort of portrait we have of a human being. I think probably pretty rudimentary psychology is if you look at a person as an iceberg, usually we interact at a very superficial level, right? So and then but what really drives a person is everything that's underneath the water. But if you think about education, so much attention is put on above the water, simply because those are things you can measure, right? So you can measure, then you can have scores, you can have, but we all know now, like human being is much more complicated than the scores you get. But there's very little attention comparatively put into below the water part, right? So in terms of their self-identity, self-efficacy, confidence, their character strength, making peace, as you see, the attachment process, making peace with themselves, with their family, and those are so important to a person that we can't overstate how important it is. But education largely overlook it because it's still largely viewing people as utility. So I think that was the trigger. It's a daunting task, but at least that's the intention. Like, how do you have almost a school environment to actually pay attention to that, both for the adults and for the kids. Yeah. So I'm inspired to hear what your friends is doing, and we're very eager to learn, or even you can be part of it and understanding what they're doing in school.
I think there's lots of synchronicity, and we are also working on another project, because I think if you look at education, we actually the very process that is so fundamental to us as human beings that we don't really support appropriately is parenting. So actually.
Yeah.
Like when people say, "Oh,
a lot of lousy parents."
Yeah, right. A lot of lousy parents. No, but really, I mean, if you in my groups, I worked with tens of thousands of people around the world, and you cannot imagine the stories I've heard, what some of the people went through as kids, what the parents did to them. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that we assume that by nature, just because we can have children, we are equipped to have children. Why is there not a supervision, a schooling system for parents?
For parents,
For parents, because the difficult child lives in the parent. When people come and say, I have difficulty, my child is difficult, they'll always look at
it's your problem.
Oh, well, let's have a look at you, and then we find out what happens to your child.
That's so true.
And so I think if there was a global, system of parent schools where every country will invest money, and this money is so well invested that we support parents. You can learn, you get knowledge, basic knowledge, you get supervision if you run into difficulty with your child. The parents grow, the kids grow. I often say kids are the natural for free therapist every parent gets. Because kids will definitely trigger your unconscious places. They will definitely hit the right button.
Right.
And if they hit the right button, they will keep hitting it. But it's amazing. Evolution built in a kind of a system to purify life through the next generation. But we have to support that process. So I think if we take care of that part, and then we look what is potential-oriented education, how do teachers get, who are the parents, who are the kids, what is the intelligence at work there, what do they need really specifically. But this means I cannot have kind of a mass production. I need to be more engaged. And then we find out that actually the capacity to relate is the most important factor in the whole thing. Because there is a famous my friend that did this project. He was the dean, the head of a university in Berlin, and he works together with a famous brain scientist neuroscientist in Germany also. And his research was about the learning capacity of the brain. And he says that he proved that the brain learns the best in a supportive relational environment. So if you have a mentor that you trust, that like a teacher that you trust that is with you, your brain kind of produces more chemicals that it makes the learning easier, basically, as like simply said. So there's a kind of a fertilizer for your brain, and that's through a loving, attentive relation.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to see, because what you said is the downside from producing good workforce is that the hurt relation again produces like an incapacity to relate properly, and then we have it in our economy world, and then we say, oh, in the disguise of professionalism, you know, we don't want any emotions, we don't need any, but then we produce cultures where people cannot stay healthy. I mean, that's not a healthy world. And then we say, yeah, but that's the world, that's how it is. Yeah, but we are making it.
Right.
I mean, there's nobody else but us that produces this. We have to change it.
Right. That's so true. I think that I'll share with you two stories. One is I myself as a parent, exactly as you say, I think I'm a lousy parent too, because I have 3 children and I realized I have a big job that I signed up for without any training, right? And then you basically, that was an interesting analogy. They were talking about, like, imagine if you were going through a complicated surgery, you're lying on basically the hospital bed, and then your anesthesia didn't work, right? So you suddenly hear what the surgeons are talking about. One of them said, gosh, I've never done this before, have you? And then the other surgeon, no, but we have love and we can figure it out. And then they said, those are your parents, right?
Right.
Like, what would you feel if you were the patient lying on that bed? You would have got up and run away as fast as you can.
Right.
But that was indeed, and then that's why even for myself, although I'm sort of on this journey of all that, and then my son, who's 8, my oldest, who told me probably a month ago, I had this, basically he was commenting me. I was basically angry at him on something. He said, okay, Mom, why you say it's not right to be angry, but when you are angry, you're always right? I was such an insightful, I was like, I'm speechless, so that's right, So that's why I think, as you say, like, kids are, basically free therapists, right? So they give you so much insight on the blind spots you have, which are many. And then second, I really echo your point around parenting, lack of parenting. So like one of the things we did in our school, because we have this online platform with the APP, basically we built a parent school, right? So our own parent has only about, our school now has over 100 children, so our parents are probably 200. But the parent school, because it's online, and then we have about 8,000 parents now.
Beautiful.
So that's the intention. Like I guess my whole concept is that the best way you can become a parent is basically to grow with your children, right? The best investment you can have on your children's education is actually on yourself. The more integrated, as you say, put together you are, the more of an environment you will become for your child. Beautiful. As you say, right? Because at the end of the day, it's that relationship, is that unconditional love and support, or emotional stability, which lots of us don't have. That's actually priceless environment, as you say, stimulants for their brain. So I think that's one. And then the second, almost a bit of extension of that, that's why the school we started has a lot of attention. I think the good way is also, I raised the point, I think, education is not only about school, it's really about the ecosystem around it, right? Parent is a big part of it. Teachers as well. I think you're so well said. I think I'm glad to know there's actually scientific support. But that's the thing I've been talking about for a whole time. I think the most important determinant for children's learning, other than some sort of basic genetic, right? So let's say there are definitely things you can change, but things the plasticity really were shaped by the adult environment around them, right? So it's basically how, if we were both teachers in a school, how do we treat each other? Right, so if we all tell the kids the right thing, but but we behave in a very bad way, the kids will take that in, right? So like, they're not stupid. They're not here to grow. They're not machines to learn what you tell them. They actually observe. They take in everything that's happening around them, right? So how we are behaving ourselves, how we deal with setbacks ourselves, how we treat each other. So it's really the field almost you can create among adults. That's the most important determinant for a school, rather than you have a math genius or a STEAM genius or whatever people are talking about. I mean, you can all learn that, but I'm glad that you're talking about the data to support it. But that's kind of the belief we've had. So how do you build the system, sort of the ecosystem around? It can be a small one, like even like 100 adults, if you have the same
That's right.
belief, you could make a huge difference. But that kind of system view is actually pretty rare. I think
That's
even,
right.
I mean, I don't know, probably better in Germany, but in China it's definitely very rare. People don't see this as a system. People say, okay, for school you got a teacher license, you teach math, and that's what a school is about. And then the math teacher can be actually a pretty bad person, but that's fine. And as long as you have a license, meaning you're qualified.
And that's right.
Right. So
that's
there's a very simplistic view of of actually what should be a quite profound and sophisticated system.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying. I resonate with everything you're saying. And also, I think I would love to strengthen the fact that grown-ups, just because in my passport is written that I'm more than 18 or more than 26 and I have a license, doesn't mean that I'm grown-up. Emotionally, as you said, most of us, in fact, are not.
Yeah.
And it takes inner work. I need to volunteer to say, oh, when I get triggered at whatever in my workplace, or when I get triggered in my intimate relation with my kid, that shows me that I'm not a grown-up in that moment. I cannot contain in my relation this situation. And I think that there is a kind of even a thinking mistake that parenting is something that just comes by life. No, it doesn't.
No.
And if we don't take care of it, we will just perpetuate it in generations. The second thing that you said is education is about creating the right environment. And I think that's a very strong sentence, that we need to think in systems. Same as healing is about creating an environment.